So imagine this situation. It's 2030 and you just watched the Dead by Daylight movie. So you want to try out the game because Trapper, the poster boy of the brand and the original killer, absolutely rocked in that movie. However, when you play, you find out how bad the experience is for this killer. You have to waste a lot of time setting up your bear traps. You have to waste a lot of time going all over the map to get them. And then, even when you set up, you have extra problems. A survivor gets trapped far away, so you try to get them, but they instantly escape because they got it on their first try. And if they were injured, then they have 0 penalty for falling into one. So now you have to reset the bear trap manually. And to top it all off, Trapper is one of the only killers that can get hindered by his own power, massively messing your entire pressure up. This is the killer that most new players will start with if they decide to buy Dead by Daylight, because of how simple he is in nature, but he is the worst choice because of how outdated he is compared to the rest of killers. It's no wonder that the Trapper is constantly put as one of the worst killers in the game, but that's not the worst part, as the devs are okay with it, as according to them, Trapper has an okay kill rate and he also fits the role of being a simple killer for beginners to start the game with, so he cannot be complicated. I even made a video defending the devs, taking a look at Trapper from a game design perspective, but nowadays, I have to disagree with my takes from that video and I completely disagree with the devs, especially now. The game's entire core identity is being changed with each patch, with boosted Survivor's base kit to a very high degree and they plan to boost them even more. It's been 2 years since the last killer that had no mobility powers whatsoever, and the loop design that the devs want punishes killers with no mobility. This is no longer the Dead by Daylight of 2017, not even the Dead by Daylight of 2022, where survivors are scared of the killer's radius and you have plenty of time to set up methodically. Trapper is a killer that teaches players territorialism to secure a spot and defend it, but with the new anti-camp feature being base kit for survivors, this goes completely against the core design of the Trapper, and the only saving grace he had, which was basement camping, is now nerfed because of it. To a lesser extent, it can be argued that the devs are also against regenning as a tactic, with the entity blocker mechanic preventing matches from taking too long, and this is purely on the killer side. As a survivor, playing against Trapper can feel extremely boring because there is no interactivity on his power, because the moment you get caught, most of the time it's over, unlike with other killers where you have to lose the chase, which is something dynamic that allows survivors to dodge. The only counterplay that exists against the Trapper is fully based on if the Trapper put his traps correctly, which hurts new players more, as they are the most likely to place them too close to windows or in the middle of pallets. And the other counterplay is exclusive to the top of survivors, those that know about holding the traps for their teammates or disarming them while having their heals 99%ed. Trapper doesn't work as a simple killer because he teaches nothing for the rest besides playing as an M1, and Wraith does the job of a basic vanilla killer much better. Trapper is a setup character, of which there are only 3 in total. He's also by far the killer that gets punished the most by their own mistake, as he can go as far as losing a survivor while carrying them. And the devs try to buff Trapper a lot, as he has received a significant amount of buffs already, but it's clear that no matter how many buffs you do, Trapper's power design is incompatible with modern Dead by Daylight. So this is why, in this video, I want to propose a rework idea that aims to modernize Trapper and reimagine this character as if he were released today. Most importantly, I don't want to make the Myers rework and Singularity quality of life mistake of ruining the reason why Trapper still has mains to this day, and that is because his gameplay, despite subjectively boring, is a unique archetype that deserves a spot in Dead by Daylight. Winning as a Trapper is significantly more satisfying compared to winning as a ghoul, and that's the reason he is my second highest prestige as killer. Remember that this video is mainly done to entertain. I am not a game designer and my ideas could be completely flawed, so let me know in the comments if you find any problems with them. So let's begin with the pain points of the Trapper and what makes him so bad in the current state of the game. To begin with, it's his nature as a setup character what hinders him, as all of them have to spend time in the early game in order to place around their traps. However, in the case of Trapper, he actually has to walk all over the map in order to pick up the traps first before placing them, which is double the effort compared to the rest of trap setting characters. Every single character that comes with a placeable feature has them already included by default in their kit. Hag has 10 mud traps, and the moment she places more, the oldest one disappears. Demogorgon has 6 portals he can place wherever without collecting them first. Skull Merchant starts with all her drones already in the inventory, and Singularity works exactly like Hag does where the biopods cycle. Another huge pain point of making traps spawn all over the map is so it gives a disadvantage to Trapper, as a survivor could find a bear trap at the beginning and identify the killer immediately. And also, depending on the map, some traps can spawn in very bad spots, especially in 2-floor maps where you have to take the scenic route or the swamp, a map notorious for its poor trap spawns. For that reason, Trapper is legitimately one of the only killers where some players might not even play with the full extent of their traps, as they could spawn so away from all the action that going there makes you lose all your pressure, of which you don't have much. So how does one fix this issue? Well, it seems simple, right? Give him all his traps base kit. And that sounds like a solution, but if you remember my original Trapper video, you might know why this could be a bad idea. The vibe I got from the developers was that they actually want Trapper to move all over the map in order to collect the traps, simply to prevent new players from placing all of them in the beginning of the match on the very first vaults and pallets they find. It's why this ability is locked behind a very rare add-on, something a new player will not use most likely, and why it has such a heavy penalty attached to it. So in the eyes of the devs, this is either too much, or it goes against completely what they want to do with Trapper. Another solution I have seen many players suggest is to allow Trapper to collect bear traps from lockers, taking the furthest one to him once he opens one, but I would rather not have another killer where the power is tied to a locker. And the final solution I have seen a lot of players suggest is to allow Trapper to look at a bear trap in order to recall it, but this is personally something I am against for 2 reasons. The first one is that you could always carry one trap to constantly shut down every single loop by setting a trap, forcing the survivor to leave, recalling the trap, and repeating the process. If there is anything that we can learn from the artist, is that holding W is by far the most boring counter a killer can have. But even if that is not a problem, something I personally love from the Trapper is how grounded he is as a character. There are no entity boosts, like the Deathslinger having chains that penetrate walls, nor crazy magic effects like a bell that turns you invisible. Trapper is one of the grounded characters with a power that could exist in real life, and I would like to keep supernatural powers on his kit to the minimum if possible. So instead, here is my solution, and something I haven't seen mentioned anywhere. The Trapper now starts the match with 3 bear traps, one more compared to life, and he can carry up to 10 traps. But here is the main rework. Now, instead of traps spawning all over the map, they will passively appear in the Trapper's inventory after a short period of time. For example, every 15 seconds, the Trapper will get an extra trap until all 10 are present, after which this stops. So with this change, now the Trapper can have all the traps in his inventory eventually, so he can find a survivor early in the match, chase them, and he doesn't have to leave the chase in order to pick up a trap that is a bit away, as one will eventually appear in his inventory if he doesn't have all 10 of them yet. The timer is there so that it is not possible for a new player or a casual player to just plop all their traps on their spawn, allowing them to move around the map first in order to find trap spots to set. And most importantly, the 3 traps at the beginning is a safeguard to ensure that the Trapper doesn't feel clunky and force players to wait in case they want to trap a specific spot and they don't have the bear traps yet. Any argument that goes against the timer can be countered by simply seeing how long it takes Trapper to get a trap and come back to the spot you want to set it on. Even in extreme situations where you might have to wait 4 seconds for a trap to shut down a loop, it's still better than having to do all the trip to get it and then come back. The aim with this change is to have as little downtime as possible, as many trapper players simply cannot afford the time to pick up traps that are in very irrelevant spots, especially when survivors gen rush or when they are found early. Now, Trapper will get all of his traps passively while chasing or while setting them up. You're guaranteed to have access to your power all the time. But as you might know, having access to all of his traps is not enough when he still has to be on an odyssey each time survivors activate or disarm his traps. And this is a very slow process compared to other killers. Trapper is extra punished when survivors interact with the traps regardless of the outcome, because once used, he has to come back to the trap to reset them manually. Hag has to manually reset the traps, but she compensates with her teleporting power and how she doesn't have a limited amount of traps. Skull Merchant literally has her traps reset when interacted with, and she can recall them at will. Demogorgon just gets the portal back, and Singularity's traps also reset naturally, and he can destroy them from afar if misplaced. The Iridescent Stone, an ultra rare add-on which reopens one random trap every 30 seconds, is required if you even want to have a chance against competent survivors, because simply put, Trapper doesn't have the mobility nor the time to go back to reset his traps. This is such a game-changing add-on that there is little argument to not implement it as part of his base kit. Is this the solution? To give him the Iri Stone Basekit? In my opinion, no. Because this add-on has a feature which I personally don't like, and that's how it's completely RNG based. This means, as a killer, you have little control of when your power resets, no indicator whatsoever, and this can be awesome in some situations, especially when those random traps you didn't set up open, but it can also bite you back. So I never thought I would say this, but I think Trapper could learn an amazing lesson from Skull Merchant. This is how I would completely rework the traps and modernize the way Trapper sets them up. Let me introduce you to the concept of throwing bear traps, something I have seen suggested in many Trapper rework videos, and the reason I think this is the best solution for the Trapper is because this is already something that technically exists in the game. Look at what Naughty Bear does during the Mori. He literally throws the trap and it sets itself. Even the devs know how seamless it would work if it were to be programmed into the game as part of his power. By allowing Trapper to just throw traps in a short range, it would make his power feel smooth compared to the stop and set he is right now. And the best part is that it would actually give him, finally, a chase power, as long as he still has a trap in his inventory. Now it is important to note that in order to prevent Trapper from completely shutting down loops with his power, or to instantly trap survivors by throwing the traps at them, a short timer before they set is important. So, after throwing a bear trap in a short range, the trap will arm itself after 5 seconds and Trapper will slow down a bit, giving survivors time to react or dodge to the traps. Remember that the Trapper has the strongest trap in the game, so making it as easy to place as Skull Merchant drones makes no sense game design wise, as there still needs to be balanced components to it. However, this slowdown and timer is still much better than having to place the traps manually, so overall, the Trapper is still buffed with this change. And this trap arming time is the entire core of the new identity of bear traps, so let me present you timed springs. Now, each trap will always have a timer allocated to them of 50 seconds anytime they are disarmed. When done so, they make a ticking sound that both the Trapper and the survivors can hear, similar to this. And this timer will go faster and higher pitched when the closer the bear trap is to rearm itself. Trapper can also just see the color of the trap becoming redder when it's about to set too, to make it easier for the killer to know. This allows survivors to understand that traps will rearm themselves after a while, and also show their location so solo queue knows where they are when they are disarmed. It also completely removes the RNG aspect of traps opening randomly during a chase, as instead, a survivor will know for a fact when the trap is about to open, and the same happens for Trapper. Of course, this is applied to traps thrown by the Trapper, where their arming time is significantly shorter. Now, you might wonder why such a high number of 50 seconds instead of 30 seconds like the Iridescent Stone. That's because, again, the bear traps are significantly more lethal than the biopods and the drones, and those have a 45-second cooldown. Additionally, the add-on only opens one every 30 seconds, but with the rearm timer, each trap will open itself after 50 individually, so overall timing wise, it is still more efficient than a 30 seconds of gambling and hoping the trap you want rearms itself. Of course, Trapper can still come to a closed trap and rearm it immediately, or just pick it up. And now that bear traps rearm themselves, another buff is to give makeshift wrap base kit for Trapper, so he cannot be punished by his own bear traps. Instead, when they close, they start the same rearm timer, finally allowing Trapper to punish survivors that are trying to close the bear traps from the opposite side. This add-on can instead be reworked into making the rearm timer 10 seconds after stepping on them, so it's faster. This way, the Trapper can set his bear traps and not be severely punished when survivors start closing them, or not have to reset them if a survivor escapes while far away. This highly increases the lethality of Trapper, and even gives a new type of counterplay where survivors constantly have to close the traps if they want to have safe loops. And now, for the final touch, let's modernize the bear traps because they are very outdated as a concept. First of all, I really dislike how when you're injured, you literally have no punishment for stepping on a bear trap from afar. Now, you get the deep wound status effect if you escape from a trap while injured. Now that deep wounds is a base kit mechanic in every single match, and let's be fair, it just makes logical sense. And it's time to remove the gambling factor from traps and replace it with a 7 seconds animation of the survivor struggling to get out of the trap, or half of it if a teammate helps. It just makes no sense for this mechanic to be so RNG based, as it can be really good for the Trapper or really bad and allow survivors to escape fast. 7 seconds allows Trapper to know if dropping the chase for the trap survivor is worth it or not, and removes the BS gambling aspect of it, which is completely outdated for a killer power. If a survivor steps on a trap, the Trapper needs to be rewarded and not gamble. However, it can be argued that the gambling aspect is something the devs actually want, as it makes being trapped exciting from afar, as you desperately escape a trap to escape on the last second. Well, let's make traps cool and give new players that creepy experience like never before. This is the anticipation mechanic for the Trapper, taking inspiration from the Unknown, the Deathslinger, and the Houndmaster. Something I think that is very immersive when playing against the Unknown is dispelling the hallucinations. It puts you on this very personal animation with the killer and yourself, and it gives that creepy vibe that something could be wrong at any moment. Let's apply that to the Trapper. Now, anytime a survivor steps on a bear trap out of a chase or outside of a specific range of the Trapper, a dramatic sound will play, alerting you. The camera of the survivors will focus on the Trapper, as his aura will be revealed to them like is the case for Springtrap. Think of it like the Unknown's camera animation where you come close to the hallucinations before dispelling them, or how the camera points at the Deathslinger when you are being reeled. You as a survivor can see how the Trapper is rapidly approaching you, making this experience intense. And I literally mean rapidly approaching, because from the location of the Trapper, a trail will spawn just like the one for Houndmaster with Snug, that allows him to move faster in order to get to that trapped survivor and giving him a mobility component. This prevents the haste from being used as part of a chase, punishing a teammate for falling into a bear trap, and is the most elegant solution I have seen for this anticipation mechanic. It even fits Trapper because he is the owner of agitation, and that's exactly what the flavor text is about. This is an attempt at what I am looking for from a survivor's perspective. In my opinion, this adds the very needed flair to make the Trapper feel like a horror character. The drama of the killer approaching you and not knowing if there is enough time to escape or not, It makes the bear trap experience much more immersing as a survivor, improves the audio design to make it much more satisfying for the trapper, and adds that horror flair that this game could get, taking advantage of the fact that the trapper's power is basically stopping the movement of a survivor in place. I am sure that this is something that would be very cool for newer players and casuals. And finally, this is the only change that I am personally not sure of, because trapping hooked survivors is something that is very strong for the trapper and can lead to very fast wins. However, if all the changes previously mentioned are enough to make him feel strong and dynamic, then I think that adding a trapping clause would make him fair, where all bear traps 12 meters from a hooked survivor will instantly reappear back to your inventory, and you cannot place any of them in those 12 meters in order to prevent trapper from, for example, shutting down the basement or just spamming traps on hooked teammates. This is to make it more fair for solo queue, as a Swift can call out the traps to their friends, but a solo can't unless they have kindred. In my opinion, if we want the game to be balanced and fun for casuals and new players, then this is a sacrifice nerf I am willing to take, as the camper playstyle is something the devs actively want players to avoid, and now the unwinnable scenarios for survivors where a teammate goes down in the basement early are no longer a guaranteed lost match. This also allows the devs to buff the trapper in other aspects, without making him extremely oppressive to the point where it's boring. Think of it like original Skull Merchant. Even if she was not S tier, she was extremely miserable to play. Already, I think that this power feels much more fun to play than before without removing the identity of the trapper being a trapper, but it also allows for more interesting add-on design, making all of them unique in some way. I won't be reworking all of the add-ons in this video, but here are some of my ideas to make trapper have build variety. Bloody Coil will now apply deep wounds to injure survivors that close a bear trap, but increase the time of a trap resetting to 60 seconds to remove the 99% tactic that only good survivors know how to do, but make it not as punishing now that traps rearm themselves. Iri Stone will now have the effect of Honing Stone, of downing survivors that step on a bear trap unless a teammate helps them. Trapper Sack will have a completely new quirky effect of giving Trapper a 3% boost on action speeds, vaulting speeds, and pallet stun resistance, up to 30% for all 10 bear traps. This allows Trapper to play like a boosted M1 killer at the cost of not using all of his traps, granting him a completely new playstyle. Tension Spring, on top of rearming bear traps 5 seconds after a survivor escapes from them, will also reduce the time traps rearm themselves by 10 seconds. Honing Stone could also become a quirky add-on that grants you up to 50 bear traps total at the start and makes them completely respawn in your inventory, but it makes all bear traps break when a survivor steps on them or disarms them, and only injures the survivor's one health stage, in order to make Trapper's traps less lethal than default, but making them like mines he can put all over the map to aid him in chase. Oily Coil now works when the bear traps are rearmed automatically. Coffee Grounds now activates when you walk over a bear trap, giving you a 10% speed boost for 7 seconds. Combined with a reworked makeshift wrap, you can have speed boosts on loops that constantly rearm themselves to play like a different clown. Bear Oil completely removes the ticking sound of a bear trap and also completely mutes the sound of Trapper throwing a bear trap. Rusted Jaws now has the effect of both mangled and hemorrhage combined until fully healed. Serrated Jaws now gives the exhaustion status effect until fully healed, and Lengthened Jaws makes survivors broken for 40 seconds, so you can combine any of the two jaws to guarantee 40 seconds of value and make the traps significantly more lethal. And if I had more time, I would be happy to design a new effect for each of the Trapper's add-ons, to make him have a unique variety of builds like they did with Freddy, Springtrap, or Pyramid Head. So let's take a look at all the changes of my proposed rework. 1. The bear traps will constantly spawn on the Trapper's inventory under a timer which deactivates after 10 total traps, to allow Trapper to not lose any time picking them up. 2. The Trapper can throw the bear traps to set them up after a delay, to allow him faster and seamless setup along with a stronger anti-loop power. 3. The bear traps, when disarmed, will arm themselves after 50 seconds on a ticking timer to allow Trapper to focus on the chase and allow survivors to have counterplay where they know when the traps will rearm themselves. Number 4. Trapper can no longer step on his own bear traps, instead disarming them. 5. Injured survivors that step on a bear trap will now get the deep wounds as punishment, and the time to escape is 7 seconds flat or half if helped by a teammate, so a stat increase compared to life. 6. A dramatic animation as well as a trail will spawn when a survivor is trapped outside of a chase, to allow Trapper to arrive at their location and also add a horror touch to being trapped on a bear trap. And finally, a new set of add-ons that allows Trapper to have more build variety other than Iri Stone with Honing Stone or Bloody Coil every single match. And with these changes, Trapper no longer has a horrible early game where he has to travel all over the map to collect his power. He no longer feels clunky unlike the other seamless setups of the other trap characters. He no longer gets severely punished by his own power, allowing an easier time for casuals. He no longer depends on an iridescent add-on in order to have a chance against survivors with double-digit playtime hours, and his gambling power is now replaced with a dramatic animation to make Trapper feel scarier than before and exciting for new players to face. Let me know what you think of these changes and if you have any suggestions yourself. As always, a huge thanks to my members for supporting the channel and making these videos possible. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.